Hello and welcome to all our participants. I can see a lot of you are joining. Thank you so much for being a part of today's webinar. Before we begin, I'd just like to share some rules for our participants, requesting all of you to please stay on mute at all times. If you have any feedback or suggestions, requesting you to kindly put them in the chat box along with your name and your organization, so it will be easier for us to connect with you. We shall take a few questions at the end of the webinar, so do stay with us till the end. And if you have any questions, put them in the chat box and we'll definitely have our speakers answer these questions. And like I said, requesting you to mention your name and your organization when you share your suggestions and questions. Thank you so much. Hello and welcome. Thank you for taking the time out to join us today for a much needed conversation, I would say, on inclusion and ways in which we can create and promote inclusive opportunities and systems. Before we delve deeper into this topic, I would like to share a brief on Muktangan. We are a unique community-owned educational project primarily based in Mumbai's G South ward, where we offer child-friendly, inclusive, and holistic education, leveraging the potential of the community. We continue to impact more than 4,000 children from underserved communities. More than 900 members, community members who are mostly women, have been developed and placed through our teacher education programs. And we've been able to reach out to more than 75,000 children and more than 5,000 teachers and teacher educators through our various outreach projects across India. When we look at schools and the education system, we often find ourselves grappling with a lot of questions like how do we create inclusive learning opportunities and how do we bring about a shift in mindsets? It gives me great happiness to introduce our speakers for today, who are here to share their experiences as well as some vital strategies when it comes to promoting inclusion. I just like to take a minute to share my screen. I hope this is visible to everybody.
Yes, it is.
Thank you. We have with us Ms.Kate Currawalla, who is the founder president of the Maharashtra Dyslexia Association. She's been working tirelessly since its inception to expand and develop the reach of the association so that children with specific learning disabilities have access to high quality testing, assessment, remediation, and to ensure access to an appropriate education within the mainstream system. Kate's energetic determination and unflagging attitude has resulted in the association's expansion from a tiny office in North Mumbai to 4 centers across the city. Her sense of enterprise and perseverance has resulted Her sense of enterprise and perseverance has resulted in several fruitful tie-ups for the association in the areas of training and publications. A graduate of arts from St. Xavier's College in Mumbai and a PG diploma in mass communications, Kate has worked as a freelance journalist and short filmmaker. She was a regular contributor to several reputed media channels, including the Swiss Broadcasting Corporation and Doordarshan. In 2003, she was elected a fellow of the renowned Ashoka Innovators for the Public, a Washington-based foundation that promotes innovative entrepreneurship in the voluntary sector worldwide. In 2008, she was felicitated as a Woman Achiever of the Year by Sri Shanmukananda Fine Arts and Sangeeta Sabha. We welcome you, Ms. Kate. Ms.Shamin Mehrotra is the Director, School Outreach Services, a senior mental health therapist and part of the Ummeed management team for over 20 years now. Shamin works with the broader space of education and supports schools to promote and facilitate the inclusion of children with diverse learning needs within the mainstream settings and to support children so that they can engage and learn more meaningfully in school settings. An integral part of her work is her passion for working with children with disabilities and their families and providing them with ongoing mental health and counseling support to enable their overall journey in a positive direction. She has also been instrumental in developing, designing, and delivering training modules in the context of mental health at Ummeed. Welcome, Ms.Shamin. Ms.Ritika Sahni has a master's degree in music, is a gold medalist from Rabindra Bharati University, Kolkata, and has a bachelor's degree in deaf education from Ali Yavar Jung National Institute for Speech Hearing Disabilities in Mumbai. She has been part of the disability sector for the last 30 years, having been a communication therapist, special educator, a support teacher, heading the speech and language department at ADAPT Mumbai, among other roles. She founded Trinayani in 2006 and currently as a trainer and a consultant in disability inclusion, she regularly designs and curates sensitization campaigns for diverse stakeholders, be it corporates or schools, colleges, hospitals, etc. As a disability campaigner, she runs a spa employing blind massage therapists, curates inclusive events, creates awareness films, and collaborates in advocacy projects with like-minded NGOs. Among others, she has been awarded the Rex Karamveer Puraskar, a global award for social justice and citizen action by iCongo. In March 2020, she was recognized at the top Global Diversity and Inclusion Leaders Awards function by World HRD Congress and ET Now. She was invited to Dubai Expo 2020 to share the Trinayani journey on a panel titled Inclusive Societies Designing for All. Welcome, Ms. Ritika. Ms.Ila Shah is a professional working in the area of special needs and inclusion for the last 16 years. She has been at Muktangan since 2014, heading the inclusion department. Prior to that, Ila was based in Hong Kong, working with an international school supporting students with LD and with Focus, a support organization with children with ADHD. She has a master's in education in special education from the University of Newcastle upon Tyne and a PGDE from Hong Kong University. Welcome, Ms. Ila.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here and making the time to talk about this very pertinent topic of inclusion. I think I have some amazing group of experts here. Let me start with a cartoon. Illustrates our topic so well. Shruti, you have it? Okay. While inclusion encompasses a broad range of marginalized groups within our society, yeah, thank you. So I think this illustrates our topic very succinctly. So while inclusion encompasses a broad range of marginalized groups within our society, for today's topic and for today's discussion, I would like to focus on children with special educational needs being included in mainstream schools. When UNESCO mandated that all schools should become inclusive, India was one of the first to sign up. And the recent NEP is being hailed as the new era of educational reform. Shruti, you can take this off now. They have introduced many good initiatives, and we are all working towards making reform and initiatives in inclusion. So from a policy perspective, it appears that we want to take things forward in this direction. But let me give you an idea of the current situation in India. Today, there are over 52 million children with developmental disabilities. Out of these children, 3 out of 4, age 5, are not in school. And 1 out of 4, from the ages of 5 to 19, do not attend school. It has been found that disabled children rarely progress beyond primary school, and only 9% complete secondary education. So the question that comes up is, why are these children not in school? And if they are, then why are they not staying in school? Let me tell you a bit about Muktangan. At Muktangan, we have made inclusion a priority. But to ensure that this can work, we needed to get everybody on board, starting from management down to students and parents. We created a special needs department, and we have 2 special educators in each of our 7 schools who support these children. But in addition to that, all our teachers and faculty have been given training in awareness of special needs so that they can even support these children in the classroom. Our children spend 90% of their time in the classroom alongside regular other typical children. So what we have seen after having these children with various different disabilities in our classrooms is that not only do they benefit from being in the classroom, but it's the other children, the typical children, who actually benefit by learning to make accommodations and to adjust and to support these children in their daily school life. So now, while the term inclusion is being used quite loosely these days, it's almost become like a buzzword. I would like to begin by asking each of you, what does the term inclusion mean to you? And why is it important for all children to experience inclusion? I would like to start with Kate.
Kate, you're on mute.
Thank you, Ila. To me, inclusion means creating an environment where all stakeholders feel welcomed. In a school, that would mean definitely that all students with all kinds of from all kinds of backgrounds, with all kinds of needs. And I do believe that every child has some kind of special need or requirement that would make them feel more comfortable in their school. It's creating an environment which is inviting and accepting of everybody.
Right.
And catering to everybody's special requirements. I wanted to add here that I think this is a very important topic, because let's look at it from a different perspective, the perspective of society. Children, yes, children have challenges, but they also have enormous potential. And that potential could make them contributing members of society as they grow to adulthood, if we would only allow them to, and if our schools would develop that potential, allow them to develop that potential.
Correct.
It's very, very important that they grow up in a normal environment, a normalized environment, which accepts them for what they are, because that is where they thrive. That is how they will thrive. And that is also a sort of springboard for them into a more productive adulthood, where they would be independent earners and contributors.
Yes. Okay, thank you. Shamin?
Sure. Thank you, Ila. Firstly, thank you, Muktangan, for doing this. Ila, like you said, I think this is not only the buzzword, but I think it needs to be the buzz phenomena, because it is something that we all need to work toward. But to me, I think inclusion is essentially a journey. I mean, you know, there's no start point, there's no end point, and there's definitely, you know, there's no perfect student, there's no perfect teacher, there's no perfect school. You know, it is a journey. And so I think it's a matter of a mindset, and it's really about a matter of wanting to do it and wanting to start at some point. That could be any point. What it will look like in individual schools will be, of course, very, very different. Because it will depend on so many factors within the school, right? It'll depend on priorities, it'll depend on available resources, it will depend on the buy-in from various stakeholders. So I think inclusion is, you know, it's all about that, because, you know, Kate, when you were talking about they get a chance to sort of be normal in some senses. I think really what is also normal, right? Like who has decided what is normal? And so it is, it will look different. I guess the fact that we have to talk about this word inclusion and use this word, to me oftentimes means that we are being exclusive, because it's some of us on the inside who are getting to sort of decide who else gets to be a part of that group. And so I think inclusion is so much. I don't think there's a definition. Of course, there are many definitions in some senses in terms of what exists. But to me, it's really not about being invited to the party. It's about wanting to dance. So it is about a sense of belonging. It is about sort of, it's about people weaving into the fabric of society, not having to fit into a specific sort of set, defined way of doing things. And it's so much more. I think oftentimes people think that inclusion is only in the school context. And in this, situation, of course, we're talking about it in the context of education and school, but even within the school framework, it's so much more than just sharing the same physical space in the classroom. It's not just about sort of filling the gap between the academic needs. It is so much about the social aspect. I mean, really, what happens to the child who's being bullied? What happens to the child who doesn't have any friends? What happens to the child in the lunchroom? And so it's so much beyond sort of just, giving, a differentiated worksheet. Or I think we need to sort of start looking at it more holistically. And I think the fact that we're having this conversation today means that we're on that journey. We've begun, and that gives me hope. It's a long way to go, of course, but I think the idea and the fact that we've started is great. But yeah, I think inclusion is just, a big, large umbrella term, which I hope we don't have to use anymore. But in the meanwhile, it is all of these things.
Right. Okay, thank you so much. Ritika, would you like to add anything to this?
Absolutely. I'll tell you what inclusion means to me. It means not to be left out. It means that I matter. It means that I am valuable, and it means that I add value to society. As Shamin said, it is definitely a sense of belonging to the community and a feeling that I'm not being marginalized or discriminated against on the basis of anything. It's also, as Shamin said, it's a fundamental right. Inclusion is a fundamental right. It has nothing to do with education. It's just a fundamental right that each and every one, whether you are disabled or not, has to feel. It's a feeling. I can't tell you you're included. I have to feel included. And that's what inclusion means to me. But for your second question, which I thought was very important, and maybe I'm taking that up because of the kind of work I do, you said, what does inclusion, why is it important for all children to experience inclusion? And for me, I'm going to take it in two ways. One is, for our non-disabled children in our classroom, inclusion allows them to expand their minds and their imagination. It allows them to be exposed to diverse perspectives and diversity. And also, I think it allows them to become aware, self-awareness of how to tackle unfamiliar situations, unfamiliar people who are before unfamiliar. And that is a big learning for them when they go out in the world, which is all about unfamiliar things. So if from the very beginning, they are aware of the fact that a composition in a classroom has all kinds of people, again, someone who's bullied, there could be someone from a lower income strata, doesn't look very fancy, someone who doesn't speak English very well, or speaks English with a very different, in a different dialect. So my point is, I think this inclusion, I feel, does much more for children who are not disabled than it does for children with disabilities. Now, as far as children with disabilities are concerned, what does it do? When you say, why is it important for all children, then you're also talking about why is it important for someone who has a disability. When we talk about bullying, even bullying later, when children with disabilities are together in a classroom, it also helps them become aware of and preparing them. Inclusion is about preparation. Inclusion is about preparing even the non-disabled child to accept people with disabilities, and people with disabilities to be able to get themselves including. Everybody has to do their jobs. It's just not the job of a teacher and an administrator and a classroom teacher. It's everybody's role that is very important. So I think inclusion as a whole does a lot for both children with and without disabilities and all the other stakeholders that are part of the school community.
Right. So I think that what you're saying is that the main thing is it's not so much about the people with disabilities, but it's really the rest of society that needs to start changing their mindset and also making adjustments. Like Shaman said, that, it's not like they have to fit in. It's really us making the adjustments so that they can perform and carry out their life within that system that has changed for them, that actually works for them. Yeah.
So yeah, it's really not about us and them, and I think those are the terms that we need to be really very careful about when we're speaking it. It's more
Right.
about together. It's, as I said, it's a fundamental right. So it's just a right that each one of us has a right to be at a certain place, at a certain juncture, given our age, given our developmental ages. So what the teacher has to understand is that every child can learn. I think that's very important. When we understand that everybody needs to belong and can learn, and it is up to us, as rightfully Kate said, that when you have 60 students in a classroom, all of us are in the spectrum. Just about all of us are in the spectrum. Some are very obvious, and some of us are able to very, in the societal manner, know what to do with our tics. So that's very important for all of us to understand that, and not even be very careful about the language we use when we are within a classroom speaking about inclusion.
That's true. Yes, in fact, that actually brings me to my question, which is directed to Kate. Kate, you have been one of the early proponents supporting children with learning disabilities. And MDA was started, 27 years ago, when people knew very little about dyslexia. So there is an ongoing debate about whether neurodiverse children can effectively be included in the mainstream classroom. Right. So Ritika was saying, it's teachers who have to learn how to address everyone in the classroom. What is, in your opinion, are private schools able to do justice to the children, or do they just only take children who they think will fit into their system? Kate?
You're on mute, Kate. Unmute yourself, Kate.
I don't know how I keep going on. Sorry. Well, as Shamin said, it's a process. And that process, yes, started a long time ago, 3 decades ago. At that time, I would say kids with especially neurodiversity, neurodiverse issues were already in the classroom, but they were not able to perform, or so they were getting pushed out, or they were at least getting pushed to the back of the class and not being addressed. Their needs were not being addressed. Today, I think every private school would try to, at least in Mumbai and the big cities, would claim to be more inclusive. Most of them would claim to be quite inclusive, and the law requires it. But to what extent they are willing to make those adjustments and really, create the kind of environment that we would like to see.
So yes. Sorry, but isn't it more like they're just integrating them rather than?
So I was just coming to that. It starts, of course, at the admissions level. We hear things like, we really don't have the resources to do justice to this child. So, and my question would be, isn't it time that you sort of looked at it a little differently and expanded that? Most schools will today say they have a special educator or some kind of resource center. But to what extent that accommodates these children, to what extent they get help within the classroom, or are they just being pulled out and taught separately? To what extent do they are they being integrated also in extracurricular activities? To what extent has already been discussed? Are there social needs and emotional needs being catered to? That is really, I think, up for question right now. I do see a huge difference from when we started to now. Of course, there is. But yes, it's a journey, and I think the journey is we're just still taking baby steps in most cases, even in the private schools. It's not yet a right. It's not yet, the schools are not saying, well, these are the kids who are in the school and we have to do the best we can. We have to, are we catering to them, or are we failing them?
Right. Okay. So I'll come back to that, because I think that is the question, is then where are we headed? But before that, I would just like to ask Shamin, Ummeed has been supporting children with developmental disabilities, and most importantly, autistic children for, I think, almost 21 years, and especially those from underprivileged backgrounds. So you have filled a very critical need in that space. You all have also done a lot of outreach to increase awareness about inclusion among schools. So how have you seen sort of not only the awareness, but also have you seen any changes over the years in Mumbai schools? What are the barriers that keep schools from being more inclusive?
So I'll answer the first part of your question in terms of have I seen change? And I think, like Kate, I think there's been a huge shift where people are talking about, what it means to be inclusive. And I think we've started sort of moving from initially, kids with special needs didn't end up going to school. So it was, they were just left out of the system altogether. Then came this whole idea of segregation where there were special schools. And so they went to, and it became like this whole them and us. And so they went to special schools and, there were mainstream schools. Then there was this idea of integration where everybody's sharing the same physical space, but that doesn't mean that they're being inclusive, because typically what you'll end up seeing is the entire class is studying body parts. And then, this one child is sitting in the corner and coloring something which is not at all related to body parts. So it's more like, integration. And I think because it's a journey, I think a lot of schools are right now still in the space of integration, but there's definitely been movement, and we're seeing some schools move to the whole idea of inclusion, where if a class is studying body parts and for, maybe 90% of the class or 80% of the class, the target or the goal is to identify 10 body parts, then for children with diverse learning needs, it might be okay, you just point out 5 body parts. But at least they're, using the similar sort of framework in terms of learning and teaching. And so I think more and more schools are definitely heading there, and there's been a definite shift. In terms of the barriers, sometimes I don't know where to start, because there's quite a few. But I think the largest barrier, the way I see it, is the mindset. Because it is, like it said, it's really about believing that these children should be a part of the mainstream school. And I think currently the way people function is oftentimes people work out of, a space of entitlement, that we're allowing these children to be in our school, or we're allowing these kids to, be friends, or I'm doing someone a favor. And I guess I just want to call out that nobody is doing anybody a favor. Everyone is benefiting equally. In fact, probably people without special needs are benefiting much more than, people or children with special needs. And so I think it's a give and take. I don't think it's only that we are giving, because I don't think that exists. I think that just sort of, that idea slips through the cracks and it becomes a space of entitlement, which it's not. So I think that's the biggest barrier, because sometimes I feel I don't want to do a favor. And, it is not about doing a favor. Like Ritika said, it is about a basic fundamental right. Like, nobody should be doing anybody a favor. So I think one big aspect is the mindset. But I think apart from that is also this idea of awareness, right? Like, I mean, we're still starting to talk about what it means to be inclusive, and the understanding of what it means to be inclusive is so varied. people are just about beginning to, use the term. And like we said, sometimes we just throw out all these words. What it really means is so very different for different people. So I think awareness is, of course, something that is a barrier. But along with awareness, I think even if people are aware, there is also the idea of skills and competencies to be able to sort of work with, children with diverse needs. So one is, of course, not knowing what that diversity might look like in your classroom. But the second piece is, even if you know what that diversity looks like, what am I supposed to do about this? Like, I'm not quite sure how to, work around some of these difficulties or differences. So I think it's those three. There's also this idea of mental health, because when I talk about inclusion, I think in a school system, it's not only about including the children, it's also about including the teachers. And I think that we don't necessarily always pay so much attention to them. Like, oftentimes when we talk about doing a training for a teacher, I mean, you can almost tell, right? A teacher is thinking, oh my God, like, now they're going to tell me, do this, do that, don't do this, do it like this. I mean, there's always that we're just constantly asking teachers to do. And no one really asks into how they are doing it, and I often use the example where I say that even when you're on a flight, they'll often tell you to wear your oxygen mask first before helping anybody else. And it's like that in a school system, right? Like, we need to be able to support the teachers for them to be able to support the children. And I just feel that sometimes is a barrier because there is no support for them in the larger scheme of the system. So that's another barrier. There is also this barrier of essentially leadership buy-in, because unfortunately, the way our system works, it has to come top down. And if the leadership is not bought in, then that trickle effect doesn't really happen. Not to say that it's not happening. I mean, there are many teachers doing things on their own, many, different kinds of people trying to make that push. But I think it doesn't happen at scale, and it's not sustainable unless it comes, top down. So that's another thing. The image that you showed us right in the beginning, that's a big barrier. We have a very fixed system, a very fixed curriculum, a very fixed process. And so it's one type of exam for everybody. Really, no one is asking about what their needs are and, how can we do assessments? The idea is learning, but how do we sort of, our life ends up being defined by numbers. So only if you do well in this test in this way, are you considered to sort of fit in? So I think just the whole, fixed systems that we have are tough. And one of the largest barriers I feel is that we all develop schools, we all develop curriculums, we do all these things for children without actually asking children what they need and want. So I think the most important stakeholder in some senses is left out of the, of the conversation. Like, everyone is developing fancy schools, fancy curriculums. No one has ever asked a kid what they want. So I think that's one of the largest barriers, that we just don't have enough conversation. We don't engage. We all say that, it's for all stakeholders, but do we really engage all stakeholders? Because one of the most important stakeholders in this is the child. And I just feel that they often get left out of the equation. So yeah, that's a whole bunch of barriers, and we'll come up with some more as we go along. But yeah, for the time being, that's what's coming to them.
Also, one of the biggest barriers is the physical structure. The structure, we don't have buildings, we don't have infrastructure that actually allows
Absolutely.
to be inclusive. There's some children we just can't take in.
Absolutely. Yeah, accessibility is a huge barrier.
Right. Ritika, would you like to add something? Because you have been a very vocal exponent of inclusion and worked hard to spread awareness through your organization, Trinayani. So would you like to add something to that in terms of, obstacles that you have seen while trying to raise awareness?
Shamin said something very important, and I must tell you, Shamin, that it's been a pleasure to kind of constantly only work towards awareness in my journey of Trinayani. The very first slide that she had, I don't know whether Kate remembers, but we did a puppet show called The Learning Factory, which was based on George Revis's story, which was also supported by Muktangan. So it's Muktangan who supported us, and we did a huge production at the Godrej Dance Theatre, and I used that puppet show to start conversations around equality and equity with teachers. So I took them around to about 13 schools, and then of course the pandemic struck. But we did manage to do and have this discussion with teachers across regular schools in Mumbai. As rightfully said, what's very important is that, number one, what she said about nothing about us without us. I think it's very important that there are many, many friends I have who are non-disabled, disabled friends, friends with disability, who are part of inclusive setups. They've never been to school for children with special needs. And I think it's so important if you can also take them on board to ask them about what worked with them, what worked with these advocates who are part of the regular mainstream school system, because they are experts simply by having the experience of inclusive education. So I think that that will help a lot. Again, you can have the national education policy, you can have all kinds of laws in place, but at the end of the day, there has to be work on just not awareness, because the teachers are coming into classrooms with their own mindsets and own assumptions and their own biases. So they also have to challenge their own biases, because they themselves are not product of inclusive setups or schools. But it's also capacity building. I think it's very important that you just can't take a child and because that's admission. That's not even integration. That's just admitting somebody. But to be able to give the confidence to the teachers that you're not alone, that there are many of us here who are willing to support you in your journey of including everyone in the classroom. I think that's very important, that we need to have systems in place to equip the teacher with the tools to be able to, because you can't expect it's just not a child with neurodiversity who's in the classroom. There are many children. There's someone with dyslexia, there's someone with some behavior problem, there is someone with ADHD. So there are many kinds of disabilities that can be seen in a classroom. And how, I'm always giving this benefit of doubt to the teachers that, all right, I can understand you are having a problem and it's genuine. What can we do about it? The problem is the teacher should say, I want to do something about it. I'm not happy that I'm not being able to include that child. She should be able to go to the management, as Shamin said, to the leadership to say, can I join a course? Can I do a 2-month? Can I have a shadow teacher? Can I have the parent coming in? So I think it's very important to make everyone feel disability confident.
Ila, can I just add to that? Because I think what Ritika is saying is so important. In fact, we've been citing a paper, and I'm happy to share that with you all at some point. There's a research article which actually talks about, working in the space of inclusion in terms of a triangle. And, the 3 sides of the triangle are knowing, doing, and believing. And it's this idea that, because they've also done research to talk about how teachers feel about inclusion. And most of the research says it's not like teachers don't want to do it. They're sort of on the fence, right? They're not quite sure how to do it. They may want to do it, but they're sort of in between. And so this paper actually talks about this triangle, which is knowing, doing, and believing. And they said teachers can be on any side. Like, I can really believe, and I don't know, how to do it. But then because I believe, I sort of seek out that information and I start doing. And because I start doing, I start knowing more and all of that. So it's a cycle. But you can be at anyone. So even if I don't believe in it, if it's coming top down, and the leadership is telling me to do it, I start doing. Because I start doing and I start seeing results, I start learning more. And so I know more. And because I know more, then I start, believing, because I'm seeing that change. So it's a cycle. And I think it's just important for teachers to sort of think a little bit differently to start at some point. I think otherwise it just feels overwhelming, like, oh my God, I have to do this also. But sometimes it's not even about doing more. It's just about doing different. And it's really about building awareness about what those small differences in your classroom might look like.
Okay, so I would like to say at Muktangan, we've done that. We've done we've built the awareness. Teachers are aware. We have children with all kinds of abilities in our classroom, and teachers are very, I would say, they are on board and they want to help and they do what they can. But having said that, and I'm sure there are a lot of people out there, a lot of teachers out there who would say, practically, when you're trying to implement that, when you have a classroom of 40 children and you have diverse abilities, how do you expect one teacher to address everyone's needs? Now we say that, yes, you must differentiate the curriculum, and you can allow one child to present their assignment or do their task in one way and another to do it another way. And but the question still remains, practically, how feasible is it to implement this? And I'm sure there are teachers out there who are probably shaking their heads and said, yes, how? So while we discuss this, does anyone have any suggestions or any sort of, practical input that they can give or have seen happening?
Hey, can I respond to that? Because, the last couple of years at Ummeed, some of us actually have put together this document on good inclusive practices. And for that document, we actually traveled to schools across India, because largely when you talk to, people about inclusion, whether it's donors, whether it's schools, the common misconception or the thing that you get to hear is that, all this is really good in the West. It doesn't really happen in our systems because we don't have the money and we don't have the resources. But we sort of went to schools which were high-end schools, low-income private schools, government schools, and it's happening at every kind of school system, right? It's about, and like I said, it will look different in every school, but it doesn't mean that it can't happen. A high-resource school may have fancy equipment to do it, but that doesn't mean that a low-resource school can't start. And so we've put together this document which sort of talks about examples in different kinds of schools where inclusion is being practiced. And like I said, some of these can be very simple sort of practical things. So one of the things that we spoke about, or we saw actually in schools, is just seating arrangement. So when kids are younger, they sit around a table. As they go to grade 3 and 4, everyone starts sitting in lines, and just peer learning. When you're sitting across a table, peer learning, you don't have to raise your hand, multiple times to ask the teacher. You just ask your friend, hey, what did The other thing that we saw in some schools was this idea of circle time, where again, it's done with little children and it's done with the intention of language development. But we saw it in some schools going all the way up to grade 10, and you're talking about issues that don't ordinarily get spoken about in your curriculum, right? So you're talking about things like bullying, about mental health, about body image issues. So you're using that space, and that space is
Can you elaborate a bit about circle time? Because we have circle time at Muktangan, and if you can just share what it is so that the audience can understand.
Sure. So circle time can be done in many different ways, but the idea is to create a space to be able to talk and talk about issues that don't ordinarily necessarily get addressed. So it's not part of the curriculum, but it's also, you're creating a space which feels safe. And so in the 8th grade, when someone is being bullied and you're talking about mental health and bullying, at that point, everyone is like, oh, how can we talk about this? Or there's something about sexuality and gender. Because no one has spoken about it before, it becomes like this big thing when you have to talk about it in 8th and 9th grade. But if you've had that opportunity in circle time, so usually there's one person who facilitates that conversation, and it's like an open conversation and a dialogue. There's no, and you can talk about issues preempting some things are going to happen. You can talk about issues which are currently going on in school. So it's really about bringing on, different ideas, conversations which don't ordinarily, like I said, get addressed. And kids then start feeling safe to be able to talk. They know that it's okay to talk about some of these things. Teachers know that it's okay to talk about some of these things. And like I said, because it can be done in different ways, we've seen in some schools that initially it's facilitated by a teacher or a teacher equivalent type of person. But as kids grow older, we found in one school, they nominate people, kids among themselves to sort of take on. They put chits into a thing and they pick up one chit to decide what's going to be the topic that they're going to speak about. And it's facilitated by children itself. But essentially, it's providing a safe to be a space which is safe to talk about things which are not mandated yet in a curriculum. So these are just some examples. I mean, I can share that document, Ila. I think you have the link. It's on the Ummeed website, but feel free to
share that it after this.
Yeah.
The end of this. Yes, definitely. Kate and Ritika, would you like to add anything, or shall
Kate,
I?
Would you like to go first?
Kate, you're on mute.
I was actually thinking about a kind some teachers, who do the kind of things that Shamin was talking about. And these are teachers with no training in inclusion, who really have no idea about the specifics of the kind of neurodiversity that they have in their classrooms. But something like, I'm so sorry. Something like a teacher who told me once, I make it a point to make eye contact with children who I believe, benefit from it, who may sometimes not get exactly what I'm saying or whose attention might be wandering.
Mhm.
And without calling them out or without, making it very obvious, making that kind of eye contact. I know of another teacher who knew that there was a student in the class who was a little slow in getting his books out or getting to the right page. And she would be, as she was talking and as she was announcing, okay, take out your maths books and turn to page 36, she would be reaching into his bag quite quietly while walking around the class, pull out the book, turn to the correct page, and continue talking to the class at the same time. Nobody ever realized that she was doing this for this child, but he did. And he saw her as an ally. And that really made him feel, as Ritika and Shamin herself, safe in her class. He knew he could go to her with any
Yes.
problem.
Yeah.
So it's these small things,
Yeah, true.
that being a little sensitive to the child, understanding that the things that they do, whether it's that the turning pages long after everybody else has settled down, they're not doing it deliberately. They have a challenge in doing these small, ordinary tasks, as well as, the reading, writing, spelling, memory, all that. And making these small adjustments really makes the child feel comfortable in the class.
Right.
I'm not going to take too much time. Just one thing that I wanted to share because of an experience of having seen it, and I thought it was very interesting. Number one is, as Shamim said, it is really, it's not so bleak. It's just that it's not happening at the pace at which we are expecting it to happen, as far as inclusion is concerned, because it's happening in very diverse ways. Interestingly, in diverse schools. I was in Assam, Guwahati, and I went to a school called Montfort School, which has children with hearing impairment and cerebral palsy, and there are blind students, and everybody in that school knows sign language. It's just part and parcel of learning. So the teacher is teaching and signing. The student who is blind has somebody helping them with the, so there's a braille there. There's somebody sitting there with the hearing aid, and somebody's helping. So I think as all of us are saying, it does so much for people when they see that happening it's such a happy place to be, where everybody is having difficulties, everybody is being included, everybody is being supported, and it's not that I go for a class, it becomes tuition, and just because someone with a disability goes for a class, it becomes support service. It's support nonetheless, no matter who's going for what. So I just wanted to share that because I thought that was brilliant, the way everybody spoke in sign language there.
Yeah, and I would like just to mention that this new NEP actually requires the use of Braille and the Indian Sign Language. So that is part of the new initiative. So hopefully that will start getting implemented soon. So I actually wanted to go on a slightly different track and say that, when I mentioned earlier, I said, very few students, only 9% of the students are completing secondary school. So do you not feel that it is important that, because if they stay in school, then not only do they become, they are equipped to join the workforce, they can contribute economically to society, and therefore they are not dependent on anyone, they have their independence, but also it, they know what their rights are, they can avail of their rights, plus they can protect themselves from abuse. So there are many reasons why we need to keep these children in school. So do you have any sort of suggestions for what we can do to keep these children in school, or why do you think they are not staying in school? Is it just that they're not being their needs are not being fulfilled? Ritika, do you have
You're talking about, I mean, when you talk about employment, we talk about retention. So it's just that people do get employed. At times, retention becomes difficult. Uh, in my experience of whatever workshops and campaigns I've done with schools,
Mhm.
if there are so many variables to this. At which age did the child get admitted into the classroom? If you suddenly we have at times suddenly somebody coming in class 7 or class 8. So I think what's very important, that as I said, I won't be the right person to answer this, but as long as just saying that uh, why they're actually, I've never thought like that, because whenever I've gone somewhere, I would not go
Let
into
me
why.
take
I would
that.
rather say what's the solution. Let's get into the solution. If there's a problem, what is the solution? I don't want to hear the problem. There is a problem, it's very obvious. The child has a disability, the child needs to be in a regular school, and I'm not saying the child is always right. Is the parent involved? There are so many factors. Is a parent involved in the education of the child? Because it's not just including the child in a classroom doesn't mean the parent's role gets over. It becomes compounded, in fact. So it does, it's not only a process, it's not only a journey, it's a lifelong journey as far as inclusion is concerned. Whether it's in class 1, then from class 1 to class 2, that's a challenge. Class 2 to class 3 is a challenge. So I don't think there's really some kind of a checklist that these things have to be marked and we will be able to then successfully include somebody. It's all very specific to child. It's child, I won't say case, but it's unique to every child. Every child's issue has to be dealt very differently, and you can't use that in solving anybody else's problem. So but as I said, it's a team approach. It's a team which has to get into it, whether it is the management, the administrator, the school, the parents, the father. Is a father equally involved? Is a mother equally involved? Who is the major caregiver? What is the language spoken at home? At times, I have seen in a classroom, the problem was that the child in classroom was being spoken to in English, and both mother father did not know English. They were speaking a vernacular language in their classroom. It was a simple solution of telling that parent that you possibly can't keep saying wo padhta nahi hai, English is bad, he fails, because did you know that he doesn't speak in English at home? So to me, I don't think there is any kind of a blanket checklist to figure out why these things don't happen. When any such parent comes to me, I'm forever saying, because I like that, I like to switch on the solution mode, that all right, problem is there, now let's just keep that's given, what can we do? And there is always a solution.
Yeah, I want to just, sorry, Kate, go ahead.
No,
not at all.
Okay. No, I just wanted to add, this idea of it being everyone's job, like you said, Ritika, because I think what ends up happening in a school system sometimes is when schools don't have resources, in fact, everyone sort of pitches in when they believe that they should do this, right? I've often found in schools that have resources and schools that end up having learning resource centers and special resource centers and whatever name they want to call it with, it then becomes this team's responsibility. So then it almost becomes like it is my role to sort of identify, where I'm finding difficulties, then pass this child on, and now it's that person's problem. And I think that's sometimes where that gap happens, because I think as teachers, there has to be that onus within the classroom too, right? And it's not about diagnosis. It's just about, when we talk about inclusion, it's just about good inclusive and teaching. Like, it's about good pedagogy. It's about good teaching practices and pedagogy. And so when we are catering as teachers to diverse needs, it forces teachers to be more creative, right? Like, Kate was giving the example of, the teacher reading out the instruction and simultaneously doing it for the child. I mean, if a teacher uses single step instruction, so instead of saying, remove your math book, open to chapter, page 37, open to chapter number 6, and let's do sum number 7. If she just pauses for like 3 seconds between each of these instructions, it's going to benefit the child with a diverse need more, of course, but it's going to benefit every single class in that child room. I mean, if you're going to use a visual schedule, it might benefit, the child with autism, on the autism spectrum much more, but it's going to benefit every single child in their classroom. So I think it's also about starting to see what we can do as individuals versus trying to find someone to fix this for us. Like, Sure, sometimes professional help or help from the outside is also required, but that doesn't mean that we can't do small stuff on our own. And like Kate used the word, sometimes it's just small adjustments. It's not even like you're doing anything, more. You're just doing it slightly differently, making an adjustment to what you're currently doing. And that really, really helps.
Right. Kate, you wanted to add something?
Yes, I would like to take it from a slightly different angle, because you talked about why do kids not make it through secondary school, but also you mentioned how important it is that they should be life ready and job ready.
Correct.
So what we have been observing very often is that kids, yes, they struggle through school. Even if they make it through school, they don't really know what they're good at. They don't really know what they want to do with themselves after school. And it's because they've not been given opportunities to explore, everything that life has to offer, that school has to offer. They've not been given opportunities to discover what they're really good at and what they like doing. And I think that is a very important factor that we need to keep in mind. And yes, as Ritika said, it's the parents' duty as well as the schools. You can't put everything onto the school, but if we all were to gear ourselves to believing that the child has potential and believing that the child is good at some things, just as they're not so good at other things, or they are very challenged in some areas, then we will be, we will definitely look at building confidence, building opportunities, and opening up avenues that will keep the child engaged and believing in herself or himself as they go through the school.
Right.
I think that is what is really important.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And you did mention that, right now, I mean, children are not being exposed to anything, so they don't know what their career opportunities are.
Yes.
And all.
Yes.
Right now, there are, at least as far as I know, very few organizations that hire children with different abilities. I wonder whether is that changing? Is that because we have no requirement, there is no requirement for organizations to hire people with different abilities, but yet there are a few that are taking the initiative to hire. So I wonder if, if there were more organizations that were exposed to this and started hiring, then opportunities would automatically arise for these children. Ritika, you said you were seeing an increase in the number of organizations that are willing to hire people.
Yes, and it comes directly from the fact that I receive a lot of calls and have in the last 1 year done a lot of sensitization workshops for companies like Infosys and Wells Fargo and Cognizant. So, inclusive hiring, disability hiring is definitely creeping into the mainstream hiring economic activity. It is definitely creeping in. Since this is really, since you asked me this question, I actually went ahead and did a little bit of, I managed to do that, Ila, a little bit of research, no matter what was happening in my life. So, the one thing, while I was doing this workshop for Infosys, the global head was very passionate about it, and we actually did a lot of interaction. And she said something very interesting. She said there's a social case for employing people with disabilities. There is a business case for employing people with disabilities, and there is also a regulatory case for employing people with disabilities.
Oh, there is. Okay.
Oh, there is. So, and as recent as a couple of months back, SEBI has come up with an equal opportunity policy for PWDs 2002-1 and 2002-4. They've just released it. It's a notification by by SEBI. Again, SEBI has something called BRSR, which is an effective compliance and communication tool for a company's non-financial disclosure. So they want to know how many people have you included who are from marginalized communities or diversity, the DNI. The DNI is becoming a big thing at this point of time. And it might not lead to anything else, but it definitely will lead to reputational loss. This BRSR, once it comes into force, that, as a company, whether it's gender or whether it is the LGBTQI or whether it is ability or disability, that's going to happen. As far as neurodiverse is concerned, I know for sure, and I think all of us know, that SAP Labs hires many, many people, adults with autism. I have interviewed two myself. One of them recently got married, Viraj. I think Viraj got married in Bangalore. So as Kate put it, and something I was telling you yesterday, Ila, that if the purpose of education is livelihood, which is what it is, at the end of the day, it's livelihood. We want our adults to kind of have independent living.
Yes.
So in that case, there are many, many adults with autism that I'm aware of who are perhaps not, they might not have really cleared their examinations, but they are in various smaller enterprises. They are being included in workplaces, and there are workplace adjustments that are being done. Because let's get one thing very clear. Like you speak about inclusion in education, we are also talking about inclusion in employment, where we talk about recognizing diversities, responding to individual needs, promoting social cohesion, and also support. Again, support for each person with autism is different from the other person. So again, it's a team effort. But as far as I know, I must share that I see a lot of openings, just not for neurodiverse. I see a lot of openings for persons across disabilities within corporate sector, because they've also realized that it helps in the corporate culture it helps in corporate culture. It does a lot for the person with disabilities, whether it's self-confidence, whether it is social interaction, whether it is feeling independent, but it also does so much for the culture of the work culture within that, wherever employment has happened. The cohesion, or to understand, for some of them, this is the first time they're seeing someone with a disability. They've never had to go to school or live alongside. So at least they get to work with people with disabilities. And let's not forget, by nature, human beings are kind. By nature, we are kind. If at times discrimination happens, marginalization happens, I would like to believe it's because of a lack of information. If you inform them, if you adequately inform, if you give them the right tools, who in their right mind wants to marginalize? I think it's all a matter of awareness, which is what I'm so passionate about at Trinayani. It's all about changing perceptions and getting people to challenge their own biases and their own fears. The fear is not something that you assign to a person with disability. It's the fear of the non-disabled. I don't know what to do about it. Or will I do something which will harm? That's a big fear. And it is coming from concern that, will I say something which will hurt him, or will I do something which will hurt him? So it's a question of giving them appropriate information and relevant information so that they are confident about sitting along with somebody who's different in some way or the other. Because difference is not a disadvantage. They need to know that. Employers need to know that, and they're getting to understand that being different doesn't mean it's a disadvantage. On the other hand, it's an advantage. I did some research yesterday as far as neurodiverse is concerned, and the study by Robert Austin and Gary Pisano, 2017, stated that many people with neurological conditions such as autism spectrum disorder and dyslexia have extraordinary skills, including pattern recognition, memory, and mathematics, yet they often struggle to fit the profile sought by employers. Ms. Haswell in 2021 says in her article, she narrated a case of a gentleman at Ernst Young and said that in spite of having a high degree of professional course degree, the person was given the job of dishwashing and cashiering or washing in warehouses. So this is not just something that is pertaining to India. It is a global problem of not being able to recognize issues or to be able to do the correct profiling. And that's where I think Ummeed and other organizations come in to be able to liaison with the employer, say, give us your job profile, we will match it with people, because matching is not something that they can do because they anyway have no information about it. I hope I've been able to give you some information because I did a lot of research yesterday for this.
No, that is actually very amazing. And it's a lot of information, and it's a lot of things that we actually don't know about. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. Shamin, if you wanted to add something to that, but I also had a question to you because you your organization does a lot of sort of awareness about inclusion and all of that. If, let's say, a school cannot become fully inclusive, and I don't think any of us really can, then what strategies or measures would you recommend that at least they begin with, because we want everyone to make a start. So
yeah. And that's an interesting question, Ila, because I think, like I said, it's a process, right? Like there is no perfect place to start. And there's not like if you've checkboxed like 10 things, then you actually are inclusive, because there's no endpoint either. I think, everybody, not only in India, but across the world is still sort of trying to figure this out in terms of what it really means to be truly inclusive. But I think one important thing for people to keep in mind is that children often model adults around them. And so it becomes really important for all of us, not just in a school environment, but even outside, in terms of how we're sort of modeling, working, and being around people who are diverse and different. So one of the examples that I can share, which was in a school that I was visiting, and I was observing a second grade classroom. Now they were in this classroom, they were sitting around a table. There was about 4 or 5 children sitting around the table, and they were given a group task to do. And clearly one of the kids couldn't participate equally as compared to the rest of the kids around that table. And the teacher, with all well-meaning and all, her intention was completely all quite there. She said, don't worry, I'll sit with you alone later and we'll do it together. Now, her intention was because the notion is, oh my God, I'm giving this child extra time, I'm taking out time, I'm sitting separately one-on-one. So the idea was to support this child. But the message that it gave the other kids on that table was that it's okay to leave this child out when she's not able to do something, and she'll figure it out later. So I think just being mindful of simple things like that in a classroom become very, very important, because, our intention versus our outcome ends up being two very, very different things. So I think that is usually the starting point, and that comes down to a little bit of like Ritika was saying, awareness, because I have to start thinking a little bit more mindfully of what am I really trying to do. And we don't have the answers. I mean, we will make mistakes along the way, but I think being okay with making mistakes and still continuing to try, because one size is not going to fit all. So if I've done something for this one child, on the spectrum, it doesn't mean I can do the same thing with this other kid, because it's not going to work. So it is about being creative. And I think it's about sort of starting to think of this idea of celebrating diversity, because we use that term often. I really don't think we celebrate it. Unfortunately, our system and our culture, within that system and culture, different often means bad. It doesn't mean just being different. I mean, there are 30 odd, 40 odd people in this room. All of us have our own strengths and challenges, right? And it is about sort of building on the skills and building on our strengths, and sort of seeing the challenges perhaps, but trying to navigate our way around that, because all challenges are not going to disappear. I mean, we're all imperfectly perfect in some senses, right? Like everyone has some things going and some things not going so well, but we all figure it out, because I think we're just more open and accepting to each other. When it comes to something we've not seen often enough, then it becomes a big struggle. And I think being open to sort of trying things differently, asking, inquiring, what can be done, what should be done, I'm trying this is not working. So I think just being open to doing more, I think, and when I'm saying doing more, I think that also includes thinking differently, and thinking a little bit about it. So just starting to be a little bit more mindful, because there's really not like 10 or 20 things that any teacher can do to sort of qualify as being inclusive. I think it's really just that sense of wanting this child to belong and making that child experience that feeling.
Okay. I think all of us did say that, schools are quite limited in terms of what they can do, and in terms of also how much flexibility they have, because they adhere to a certain curriculum and they have the board that they, their priority is, of course, results. So what is the role that you see NGOs playing in the educational space? And do you think they are helping fill the gap, or is it just that they are working towards building awareness? anyone?
I think it's a little bit of both, but this idea that we talk about, Ila, when we talk about filling the gap, we'll only ever be able to fill some parts of it, right? I mean, unless everybody contributes, there's only so much that like one little section can do. And it comes down to this idea of everybody needs to take onus. So as educators, as leaders, as teachers, as anyone in that space, we all need to start doing our bit. Because it's not about, I mean, the same parallel is something that I'm making within a school, a special resource center, right? It's not the special resource center's job or responsibilities, everybody's responsibility in the school. And outside the school system, it's not an NGO's responsibility. We're all trying to do our bit, but everybody needs to contribute for it to happen meaningfully and for it to sort of make a difference and be sustainable, because otherwise we'll all be doing our bits, we'll all be working in our own silos, we'll be making a difference in our individual small knit communities, but how are we really reaching out there to make a sustainable change is something that we can only do if we all come together and everybody starts doing it.
Correct.
If I may, sorry, Kate, go on.
No, go ahead.
No, I'm just taking from what Shamin said, that everybody has to take onus, and that's why little about the first question that you answered about how schools become inclusive. There's a very interesting strategy that I'm taking at Trinayani. When I go to a regular school, I never talk about admission. I never talk about you'll have to admit a child with disability. I say there are, let's say, 6,000 students in your classroom. Are they aware of diversity? So I take that angle, that let's try and create awareness about diversities, about what it means to be a citizen of a country. It's not about passport. It's about belonging. It's about seeing to it that you accept other people into the community, you welcome them, you take ownership of other issues. And that's how in 2015-16, I curated and designed a year-long disability awareness campaign for Delhi Public School, Patna, Pune, Ludhiana, Coimbatore, which was called Celebrating Diversity, The Difference is in Knowing. And I talked about everything, but we didn't go into saying, we are here to see to it that you include children with disabilities. No, we are here to tell you, as Shamin said, it is everybody's job to be aware of their community they live in and what is it they are receiving from the community and what is it that they are contributing to. And one contribution is to always right a wrong, to always see to it that you are taking care of the last bencher. It's your duty as a first bencher to take care of the last bencher, whoever he, she may be. So I think inculcating inclusion as a value, as a life skill, I think that's very important. And I have to take this opportunity of sharing with you that UNICEF has a life skill curriculum where they have, nutrition and communication and how to say no. And as of today, Shamin, Kate, Ila, and everybody who is here, they got in touch with me and I created so there's another life skill. The 13th life skill module of that curriculum is, they did not allow me to keep it as disability awareness. So it says responsible citizenship, but the subline is interacting with our friends with disabilities. So that has been included in the life skill curriculum of Ummeed in Madhya Pradesh as a subject they will teach, with the other things. I think we have to take this very kind of a different angle and speak a language that they like and which is not threatening.
That is amazing. So we are seeing so many different initiatives and different ways in small steps that we're taking to reach even the smallest of places. Kate, you wanted to add something?
Yes, I wanted to take off on what Shamin was saying, which is when and address one part of your question, which was that what role do NGOs play, and I would say why. And that is because, yes, there are lots of gaps. There are huge gaps. What I would like to point out is also that there is a kind of feeling that, yes, these gaps are being filled by the NGOs and that's the right thing to do. And I'll give you a very specific pointer to this. For instance, for years we've been saying there needs to be awareness then teachers need to be equipped. There needs to be, some kind of curriculum or curricular modification in the training of teachers to address these issues. Has it happened? In the 27 years that we have been working, no, it hasn't. So not in any realistic kind of way. So I think I would like to raise a red flag over here. It also sometimes happens that, yes, NGOs step in, and a lot of NGOs are doing a fantastic job in terms of training teachers or teacher awareness, or bringing campaigns to schools, which definitely school managements and the government are not capable of doing. But it should not mean that the system does not change and does not also keep up with the demands of the 21st century. It's you can't leave it to NGOs. I hear all the time from officials saying, we can't do everything. Government can't do everything. That's where we look to NGOs to do this. But it should not become a part of that system. The system has to also change and upgrade.
Yeah, absolutely right. And I think that is so important. Just a note on like a positive change is that the NEP has made provision for recruitment,
Yes.
Special educators, and also disability awareness training for teachers. So hopefully we are taking steps in the right direction. Thank you, Kate, for that takeaway. I think we're reaching towards the end of our webinar. So I would like if Shamin and Ritika, if you have any one takeaway that you would like to leave sort of to end this with.
I think for me, it's really just getting people, if even one person goes away from this starting to think a little bit differently, I think my job is done, because I really think it's about a shift in the way we think. And I've also put down, I've just put in the link to, the document on good practices for inclusion. So if anyone, it's a downloadable thing. If anyone here wants to just think about it, start doing it, pick any of those, and that could be your starting point.
Thank you. Ritika, I think you shared a lot, and I think your passion is very infectious, by the way. So if you have one last takeaway.
All I would like to tell everybody here, and have them tell everybody else, is that disability awareness affects us all. It is just important for all of us. And there is no standard, there is no average, there is no normal, there's only diversity. None of the rest exists. No standard, no normal, no average. And disability awareness, once again, affects us all and starts with each one of us.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So what I would like to just share a little bit, as I mentioned in the beginning, I believe that when we're looking at a school and we're trying to do trying to become inclusive, I think there is a commitment from the whole school body, as well as cooperation from the parents to help promote the inclusion in the school. So I think that is what we have been doing for a long time at Muktangan. I would like to share some slides just to show you that, we actually, what is the practical implementation? How do our teachers cope with it? So Shruti, if you can just start the slides. First of all, I would say that, having a flexible furniture in the classroom, making it movable, and having arrangements that allow children to either sit in groups or in pairs, so that it allows for collaborative learning with different ability groups. So it's not like, there's one group of children who are smart and they can collaborate together. It's mixing up ability groups. And I think this really helps in everyone learning from each other and supporting each other, because like you said, different people have different strengths. So that's one of the things we do in our classroom. Another thing we do is allowing children to complete tasks the way they can, in the form that they can. It's not always you have to have some written work and just, present it by writing. If a child has difficulty with that area, then maybe they can present it by drawing something or putting some, pictures together or demonstrating by doing something. So here, if you look at this slide, there are different options which teachers can incorporate in their classroom, and it doesn't require that much of planning. You have to, without modifying the curriculum to suit the child's learning style, I don't think that you would be addressing the needs of every child. So that is something else that you can do as a teacher. And the last thing you can do is to allow a child to, demonstrate his ability in any way that suits him. We have, children who will sing a song or work with a group, or even simply if it means pointing something out, because that is what they can do. They're still participating and they're still part of the group. As Shamin said, you don't leave that child out and say, I'll deal with you later. He's participating and they are part of this. So I think I would like to leave that thought for everyone to kind of, when we end this discussion. I think we've had an amazing and interesting discussion today. To sum it up, I think what we finally know is that our biggest challenges are resources and attitude. And while attitudes are changing, hopefully resources and the new policies will be implemented. I would like to take this time now to take questions from the audience.
We have one question from Ms. Geeta. She wants to know, have you done a study to find out after the year-long disability awareness campaign, how many disabled students were admitted into these schools since the awareness was created?
Have we done a study?
Interestingly, Geeta, there were many children with disabilities in the school that they were not aware of. There were, and therefore, midway during the awareness campaign, we started doing workshops on learning disability, because there were no visible disabilities. And that's another thing that you often associate disability with. You tend to forget that there are many, many disabilities in this 21 disabilities recognized by the government, which are invisible, nonetheless exist. So one didn't have to do the study, because we actually got on. I'm doing the campaign, I'm doing the awareness campaign for them again as a pilot, very, very different since we learned. And this is very, very specific to teacher capacity building from April. So we're piloting ENABLE, EN-ABLE, disability awareness program for only teachers in DPS Coimbatore starting this April, wherein we are going into universal design of learning and things like that. So they did have children with disabilities, with behavior problems, with ADHD. It's just that they went unnoticed, or they kept saying that there's something not right, we would like to talk to you about it. So suddenly we had a meeting where they said, we have some issues, we'd like to talk to you about it. And that's where we realized that they had children with disabilities, and which is interesting because they didn't label them as disabled. They continued to teach, but they knew that there was something not right. There was an issue, and therefore they required help, which is where we got experts coming in to talk about learning disability.
Do we have any other questions? Okay, so that's interesting, Ritika, when you say that they weren't, as they hadn't identified them as disabled, because that's really a nice thing to know, that you're not already, kind of putting them into a category and saying that, oh, these are our, children who are.
But Ila, what's very important is, and I always say this because people have this thing about a medical model of disability, the social model. The medical model is very important. Diagnosis is very important. You have to have the diagnosis. Only then you can do anything with, but it's just that we should go beyond that diagnosis and then look at the person. But the diagnosis is very important because only then you understand the strategies, the intervention that is going to be in place. And that's when you also you don't bracket them together. So I had to actually tell them that, सारे बच्चे ऐसे नहीं हैं. If there are 10 children with learning disability, 10 have very different needs, and you'll have to then figure out how to go about it. And that's when I got a counselor. The counselor was hired after that to be able to take care of, and that's something, Shamin, I wonder, at times people would rather have a counselor than have a special educator. Maybe it just gets them into something to do with, oh, I have a special educator, that means I have no idea what attitude or mindset that is. But they got a counselor on board because after this to be able to. But as Shamin and everybody of us are saying that, it's not the question of, and after that, whenever I speak to them, I tell them, I said, please understand, when you're in a classroom, you suddenly see one child getting out of the classroom and going to the resource room, while 39 are sitting there. So I tell them, send everybody to the resource room. The resource room is not only for someone who has a disability. It should be for everybody. That should not be the mindset, oh, something is wrong with him. Why? Because he goes to the resource room. So there are too many things what needs to take care of.
Yeah, but Ritika, I would say that I have seen what's happening in Muktangan very different in that while they see that these children go to the resource room, they are so much a part of this their classroom. I have seen children who are holding hands with an autistic child to say, come on, at break, you must play with me. I'll help you walk down the stairs. I'll help you with your lunch. And it is definitely not seen as, oh, you are the one going to the resource room. It's almost like, yeah, sure, you're going there to get help, but you're still part of my class and you're still part of, you're a friend of mine. So
and it's heartening, Ila, but remember, what is the equation? You have, it's a very small classroom, okay? It's heartening to know what's happening there. And I know a lot of other places which happen there. But in some places, if the teacher doesn't intervene, then it becomes, that's because as teachers in Muktangan, you are empowered to even see to it that the way you speak, your body language, everything is taken care of. And that's so important. How you speak to the person who's helping. As Shamin said, inclusion is not about only in education. How do you treat somebody who comes to collect your garbage? That's also important. That's also being seen by everybody. So it is an attitude that has to seep into everything you do. Right. Only then inclusion in schools will be a reality.
And I wanted to just respond, Ila, to, what Ritika was saying about diagnosis. So while, for a lot of people that definitely has its place, I think it also sometimes there is a danger of labeling, because I think sometimes diagnoses are labels that professionals put on people's experiences. And so we have to go beyond that. So while the medical model definitely has its place, I think people are now shifting into the whole biopsychosocial, model. And the idea for that, if you think of the ICF framework, which is the International Classification Framework, you're really looking at inclusion also from a lens of participation. So to some extent, it doesn't necessarily matter what that term says, but it's really about how are you getting this child to participate more meaningfully in society, in community, in the classroom, in various ways. And as teachers and educators, I think that's something we need to go beyond. So it's amazing to know that they weren't focused on the diagnosis, because that's just a term for all of us to understand and to get an idea of what's going on. But that doesn't mean everyone's experience of that is going to be the same. We have to be curious in terms of sort of asking and inquiring and getting a holistic understanding of everything else that's going on, because while these things may not be going right, there's 20 or 50 other things that are going really well. And it is our job then to sort of look for those things that are going right.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, yes, I think definitely we should move towards a social model where everyone actually adjusts their thing to help them fit in. Did you have another question, Shruti?
Yes. So there is a question from Ms. Rohini Pembati. She wants to know if there are any awareness workshops happening specifically for parents.
At Trinayani, we do workshops for parents. We do it for all stakeholders. Yes.
Yeah, even at Ummeed, I mean, we have workshops that are ongoing. So if you just look at the website, which is ummeed.org, you'll get a sense of when things are happening.
And I think it's the same with MDA, and where we do a lot of work with parents, very specifically. Every now and again, we run a campaign for parents, which is, you know, a regular series of workshops. And I think most NGOs and even schools do have parent support groups.
Yeah, yes, they do. I think there are lots of options for
Yes.
this kind of training. I think we are running out of time. So thank you so much to everyone, all the speakers, as well as the audience for being here. I hope this was informative enough. It was definitely very enlightening to me as well. I think what this discussion today has highlighted is that inclusion is no longer a question or a choice, but an obligation. And on this positive note, I think I would like to end. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Ms.Ila, for facilitating this discussion and for sharing all the strategies that we could implement. And thank you to all our speakers for sharing experiences. I think it's really important for us to imbibe inclusion, really reflect and unlearn whatever we've been learning about inclusion as a concept. And that's the only way we can actually keep promoting it. We need to see our role in this process. Thank you so much to our participants and our viewers who joined us live as well. Thank you for taking time out and being a part of this discussion. And we've pasted the link of the feedback form in the chat box. So if you could take a minute to just share your feedback with us, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ila. Lovely
you.
meeting you, Kate and Shamin.
Yes.
Absolutely delighted.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for organizing this, Muktangan and Ila.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.